Hey, Brassvax here. I've been using this AGM Rattler V2 in a handheld configuration for a long time now, and it's been great in that role. It's a thermal device. What do you want me to say? It's black magic in your hand. But I was watching a hop video, as one does.
So what about dedicated thermals? The big advantage is that it stays mounted to the gun. You don't have room for a primary day optic, but you could still mount an offset RDS that has the same advantages as it does, like piggybacked with a high magnification scope. You can use it to quickly align yourself with a target before you look through the magnified thermal. You can also just use it at close range or as a backup or whatever.
And this got the Brassvax brain juices going. Let's build out not just a thermal rifle, but a setup to be functionally analogous to a fighting rifle. Or, if failing at that, a rifle that would function well in a sort of team environment where you won't be such a liability due to the downsides of the setup that the advantages that you bring to the table would, yield results. As, Nova said, with great detection comes great jank. And thermals have about the most jank you can pile onto an optic aiming system on the market right now. So most of this build, and this video in fact, is going to be based around overcoming the inherent limitations of thermals and such. And is why just put a thermal on a rifle isn't quite the answer. Thermals can be compared to like that one time in 2009 where you loaded up Crysis on your computer to flex on your friends, only to realize it doesn't just not work on your friend's computer, it doesn't work on any computer because Crysis was a glorified benchmark tester. For most people, it was a laggy slideshow with cool visuals even many years after release. Was this a good analogy, or was this me just looking for an excuse to remind everyone how good games looked back in 2007, of all things? And look at that destructible environment. Anyway, back to thermals. Thermals are that experience. Jittery, low frame rate, latency, input lag, tiny resolution, and an actual memory leak-esque freezing, as the thermal device tends to need to reset themselves occasionally either automatically or manually. And if we really want to stretch this terrible analog, if you shoot too many explosives in Crysis, your game crashes to desktop. Or in the case of a thermal device, you point it at a hot suppressor or the sun, and the device needs to shut itself off to prevent damage to the sensor. All of these make thermals a crippling experience up close where speed is king, but even where it excels, detection at medium range, there are many scenarios where a thermal device is functionally crippled as ambient environment ends up being too hot, making humans, animals, or whatever look indistinguishable from the backdrop. Very common in urban concrete jungles or in even moderate heat. There's also just a hard bake limitation that these things need a lot of battery power, so you're going to be micromanaging this thing constantly. As such, despite all the benefits that thermals bring to the table, I think in a fighting rifle context, it is unacceptable to only have a thermal with no backup or alternate aiming solution, which is where we're going to start our build with. Hypothetically, I'd prefer to solve this with a piggyback mounted red dot, sort of like with an ACOG, but unless I want to go down my evil genius Delta 34 arc and JB Whale a rail section onto this thing, of course after spending 3 days looking for it in a pile of leaves, we're unfortunately stuck with what exists on the market, and that means offset. Look, it's my video, so I'm going to bitch about it. I hate red dot offsets. I try every 2 to 3 years to make them work, and every single time I come to the same conclusion. They're up close and on flat range type conditions, they work just fine. Same speed as a red dot, at least shooting wise. But despite what early Tarkov told you, they're not nearly as consistent into action as a standard dot, especially if you're wearing armor, moving around strong side cover, stabilizing in the prone, you name it. They're also just incredibly fragile because they are this piece that juts off the side of your rifle, and they constantly bang up against hard objects.
I'm choking myself out.
I look forward to the compulsive gun buyer retort video.
Can't bring my head down enough right now.
2 hours into the session.
Look like you're sucking a cock right there.
But a offset dot that I don't like is much better than no secondary aiming system at all, so we're sticking with it. I started out with an Arasaka offset, and it kinda worked, but sheesh, that offset was brutally aggressive even in the 35-degree configuration. I think the logic with the Arasakas is that they're perfectly in line over bore. Regardless, I was not a happy chappy. Fate aligned, however, and about 1 week after running the Arasaka offset, essentially just one range strip, Valhalla Tactical comes in and saves the day by sending me the Rook? That's not how you spell Rook. It's an offset, right? But it's an adjustable offset that can go into a bunch of different positions. This sounds scary because offsets like banging into things, but because there are little teeth within the mechanism, it actually is fairly robust and will survive, well, banging into things or random high-speed encounters with sagebrush.
Keep going! Fight through it, motherfucker!
I pushed this guy all the way as close to the vertical as I could, and now I'm a much happier chappie. I'll admit, still not sold on Offset Gang, but this is basically the only way I'll tolerate it on a setup. As a random aside, I didn't need it here, but this design actually allows you to swap batteries on an RMR without dismounting the RMR. How cool is that? Seriously. But yeah, this works well, really well, in fact. You treat the red dot as the primary red dot setup, and then you switch to the thermal kind of as needed. So even though the thermal is in the main position, we're running the red dot far more often. Speaking of which, let's talk about the thermal device on the thermal gun, shall we? People have asked, Brassfax, you nugget, why do you only carry at like most 4 to 5 mags? Micro rigs are for range larpers, Brassfax, you need more ammo, Now, there's some questionable argumentation there, but the reality is, I do have more mags. I just don't carry them all on my rig. I carry them in one of these, a bandolier, which is in my backpack. Psych, this is a Venture Surplus ad section. I mean, sort of. I already owned a bunch of these before Venture Surplus, my friends owned a bunch of these, and we will continue to own these after Venture Surplus sponsors because, well, why would we get rid of them? I have up to 6 mags in one of these loaded on the side of my bag. If I need the ammo, I unzip the section, pull this out, either top off my magazines, sling it, and look at that, I have 180 rounds extra on tap. Nice. If you want your male version of a spicy purse, go ahead and use my 10% discount code down in the description and head over to our boys at Venture Surplus. Go over and head to our boys at Venture Surplus. Back to the video.
Hey, Jeff's a shooter, so he'll probably whoop all your asses.
This is a Rattler V2 provided by AGM. Hey, thanks Randy. Even though I don't think you actually work there anymore, but thanks anyway. These guys have taken the cake for scaled thermals across different price ranges. Basically, if you put all your money on black and win, there's a Rattler V2 for you. And if you put it all on red and lose, but then happen to find about $1,300 before tax as you're leaving the casino, well, then there's a Rattler V2 for you as well. The form factor of the Rattlers are all the same. They're this big, ugly thing powered by these big ol' camera-esque batteries. How do you navigate these series of confusing numbers? Well, the short answer is basically the leading smaller number is the sensor size, and the trailing number is the sensor resolution. The leading number is important for your detection range and ability to differentiate shades of hot versus other hots. And the trailing number is how well you can kind of resolve that image. Is it going to be a blurry mess? Is it going to be a blob or something with a little sharper edges? But really, both of these matter. You can't really have one without the other. Beyond that, all the models more or less are identical. Same weird body, same refresh rate, same sensor tech, and either 2 or 3x zoom depending on the sensor size. In regards to zoom, if you want to shoot or see further, you always want more zoom because the base zoom is all that you're getting. All other levels of zoom are, well, digital zoom, which is fake news. I've tried basically all of these models, including the Clarion, which is not technically a Rattler, but it looks like a Rattler, and it kind of feels like a Rattler, and it's a Rattler with an Elcam Lazy Susan. Obviously, the more expensive ones are nice, but if we're discussing AGM and what AGM excels at, I think it's above average performance for value within certain brackets. And in that regard, the 25-384 and the 35-384 are really standouts for how much you're actually paying. Personally, I find the 25-384, the one I have, is right at the cusp of what I find is acceptable as a weapon-mounted thermal in a sort of dynamic environment, fighting rifle stuff. For example, in the background footage, I'm panning back and forth between what is allegedly some rocks and some cows. Can you tell the difference between which is which? I couldn't either. In a handheld configuration, thermals are very much more often used to kind of just alert you to things so that extra sensor fidelity is not needed nearly as much. If there's one thing that I take issue with the Rattler V2 and generally commercial thermals in general, it's the lack of user interface maturity, specifically the buttons. This is fine in a monocular kind of context, but I think in a tactical use case on a rifle-mounted configuration, it's going to start causing problems. Originally, I had a mini rant that went on for like 3.5 minutes describing all the issues of these buttons, but let's cut that down. The short of it is basically every single one of these buttons requires some degree of finesse because every single button is not just double function, but very often triple functionality. This is an issue because most of these buttons, zoom, power, standby, sensor refresh, all is used leading up and during the shot process to refine your image. And in practice, you have a tendency to fuck this up, which is going to add another layer of jank on the thermal jank pile. A lot of this could be solved by having articulating buttons, for example, a power button that has an on, off, and maybe even a standby position, dedicated buttons for different tasks, and overall just deconflicting the overall user interface. Even though this has nothing to do with the actual thermal functionality, it will do a lot to really elevate this product as a serious use item.
Just kind of looks like you...
I can see it in the reflection of the lens. It looks bitchin' Brock, and don't say anything else.
I don't...
So like...
you need to get behind it so it can be your mustache.
How can we... I'm done.
Let's go through the rest of the rifle a little faster since I think a lot of this stuff is going to be dealer choice and user preference versus the other two things. Let's start with the rifle barrel length. Initially, I started out with, hey, I'm going to run this an 18 or 16-inch rifle because I want the flattest trajectory possible. In retrospect, I think I should have just gone with a shorter barrel to keep the overall package a little more nimbler. Yeah, the rifle can go out pretty far, but the actual engagement range that you're going to be comfortable with a thermal, yeah, that's going to be much more limited. The suppressor part is fairly self-explanatory. All rifles are benefited from a suppressor, and this one's no exception. But really, whatever you have lying around will probably be a good fit for this. Because this is a fighting rifle, we need to fill out the checkbox of the mandatory trifecta. We already have optics handled, now we need flashlight and sling. For the sling, dealer's choice, but I like the Flatline Fibercos. It's a really good mix of functionality versus simplicity, and I think the padding, which I like padding on my rifle slings, but I don't like the chafing that comes with it, well, this is a good balance of padding. Just thin enough to prevent the sling from wanting to do backflips over itself, thick enough to get the job done of being a padded component. I just like it, bros. And then flashlight, right? Pick whatever flashlight you want. I'm not getting into the nuances today of what flashlight you should get. I already did 2 videos on that, basically this month, I think. I have a GL4 Pro Roivon on here, which is kind of a quad functionality laser aiming module, and that gets me the flashlight tick box on the gun. Now, might be wondering, why do you want a laser aiming module, Brassfax? You're going to get killed in the sheets because they're going to see your laser aiming module. You already have a way to aim the gun, why would you want a laser aiming module? Right. Yeah, all of that's true. For me personally, I run night vision. My team runs night vision. It's not just there for me, it's there to give capability to the rest of the team. It's a, force multiplier. And if I'm already locked in on gauging a target and I'm hearing people screaming through my Comtac 5s, what the fuck are you shooting at? I just press the button in the front and the vis laser comes on, which you can see both under IR or in the visible spectrum, assuming it's, dark enough. If I'm using it in kind of more of an observational role, how often have you been in a scenario when you're like, ooh, I see something, 11 o'clock. Where, dude? Oh, yeah, next to that tree. We're in a forest, dude. Yeah, I've probably had that conversation at least 6 times. So yeah, the laser aiming module, at first glance, seems kind of unnecessary, but really is probably one of the most critical components of making this thing an actual usable team rifle, as opposed to a just random rifle you kind of splatter into your group. If I were to go the full mile, this is a good example of something I would probably put backup iron sights on. The offset dot is very susceptible to damage and breaking, and the ability to jettison the thermal and switch to a standard aiming system is really nice. I just didn't bother, to be honest. Initially, for a very short time period, I had a bipod on this thing, but the limited range of the thermal device combined with the fact that I'm using this with an offset most of the time meant the bipod felt really out of place and added a ton of weight to the front of the gun. So I put a Atlas on here and I immediately took it back off again. There's one more aspect here that I initially prototyped and never kind of went through with, and I think it's worth discussing. Initially, I thought one of these would make a lot of sense with an FRT or binary trigger. Thermals tend to be benefited by very precise shooting, as it's very difficult to correct during the recoil like you can with a scope, And as such, semi-auto was much better fit here. So despite this being a support gun, quote unquote, I don't think an FRT is a good fit here. Okay, that's more or less it. That was my thermal support gun, kind of a thought experiment of sort of setting up not just a thermal rifle, you know, everyone's been there and done that, but a thermal rifle with some consideration for usage in a team environment and to still maintain functionality as a fighting rifle. Because this channel is kind of built on honesty and I don't want to sell you on something that I don't truly believe in, I don't really like the setup. Now, it's not that it's not capable, and it's not that this configuration doesn't work. I'm getting my hits, I'm doing thermal things, it does what it's advertised to do. But despite all that, outside of like a gun-in-placed roll, so say just out of a window or being pulled out of a car, I would not replace my primary rifle with this thing, like, ever. And because I only own one thermal device, I think that one thermal device is much better suited in my case as a monocular handheld that I can kind of hand around. Some of you might be a bit perplexed by this because I think the prevailing theme among gun tubers and the internet in general right now is that thermals are the best. Haven't you watched Milsim West or footage from Ukraine? Thermals, 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 thermals. Traditional optics are obsolete. Put a fucking thermal on. Yes, I know. And that was going to be in this video discussing why I was not a huge fan of thermals versus a traditional optic here. But that became such a complex discussion and I involved interviewing some people that have used thermals in combat that I decided that just needs to be its own video. So you have that to look forward to, and sorry, I'm going to blue ball you here. And that's that, my weird ass thermal support setup that I'm going to take apart now and return the thermal back to a handheld configuration. Just a quick moment. Some YouTubers, a lot of gun tubers specifically, are being hit pretty hard view-wise right now. By the time you see this video, YouTube has implemented some new algorithms. So I just want to say, no, woe is me, right? This is obviously a dream job. I just want to say, those that still show up time and time again, despite the video content maybe not being something you're interested in, and you're showing up to, to give support, well, I fucking appreciate you. So thank you, homies, and we'll see you in the next time. Here's your obligatory Nova footage.
Where's Dogue? Oh, there's Dogue. Oh, she laser lock.
Or no? Oh, there's the scruff. There's the scruff that won't quit.
It's squeak action.
Oh, look at you. Yeah, just a bit of a fuzz-nado going on here. Holy shit. Hi. Yes, oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay. Okay. Good girl. Good girl. Slightly dirty, girl. Yeah, slightly dirty now that you've been laying down. Good God.